Hi there. Welcome to Meet My Network podcast. My name is Michael Doran. Talent Grind is bringing this to you so that you can learn about new things in recruiting, learn from some recruiting leaders. Today, we've got Dixie Vargas. She's currently at Mission Produce. And interestingly enough, a fun fact about Dixie is that she was the manager of talent acquisition at lynda.com, which was this really great educational platform that LinkedIn bought years ago and then went on to do some really interesting work at LinkedIn. So, Dixie, thank you so much for joining us today. I really do appreciate your time. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. Thanks for having me, Michael.
Of course, no problem. So I think just to start off, we can kind of do at the very top, like what initially made you decide that you wanted to be a recruiter? What kind of drew you to that as a career?
Yeah, I mean, I think most recruiters will tell you fall into it. It
Yeah.
becomes something you do. It's not something you say, this is what I want to do. I have it planned out. Maybe more so now, but I've been in the industry for over 25 years. So
Mm,
it's something I fell into.
mm.
I was working at a search firm and working there as the receptionist. It was like my first real big girl job
Oh, really?
and working there in the office. And after a year in there, it was kind of like, hey, this is really cool stuff that like what you're doing. I learned the intricacies of working at a search firm that does high end engineering and learned real quick. It's pretty cutthroat. It's a big job. And I evolved in there, learned like the grassroots of recruiting, the techniques, the art of how to connect with people and what's important in the close. And started there. And from there, I moved on to an agency that does more of like temp to hire. So I thought, okay, I got the direct hire. Let me do an executive search and then temp. So joined a boutique search firm that had a temp ground, which that was eye-opening. It's like, wow, temping is a whole nother ballgame. So got a taste of that. And yeah, it's just I haven't looked back since because I really enjoy working with people.
Oh, that's really, yeah. I had a kind of a similar experience. I kind of worked my way up into recruiting from collections to customer service and then
Yeah.
ultimately into recruiting. So I had to build the corporate experience to kind of get that opportunity. But yeah, and so I think the biggest question I always have when I take a look at people and taking a look at your experience, that you were an executive recruiter, but then all of a sudden you became a manager of talent acquisition. Can you explain a little bit about that? Like, how did you make that jump? And what
Yeah.
was it that kind of brought you forward?
Yeah, interesting. So when I was doing executive search and doing my own thing, so I went to the search agency that slash agency that did temp to hires. I left that company, they got bought. So then I started my own little venture, doing my own recruiting, doing it from my home. I had small kids. It was like, hey, this is perfect. And when I did that, there were a couple clients. Lynda.com was one of them.
Mm,
And I knew I had worked at a couple agencies, a couple search firms. Okay. I've never been in house. Let's see what that's like. Mind you, this was like 2009, 2010, 2008, when the market was really crashing just in general, as far as like the economic graph was shifting. And I was out here doing my own thing. And some people were hiring, not everybody, but I saw Lynda.com had quite a few positions. And so I called up and they gave me a rec. I was working, I had a couple, like, maybe 3 recs of theirs.
mm.
And I asked, hey, do you need someone to help? Do you need additional help like internally? And they said, I had just hired a contractor. I think we're good. And I was like, okay, but we actually need someone in house, like maybe a coordinator level. I was like, oh, let me think about it. And it was kind of like one of those things where I had to take that decision of like, if I really want to go in house and learn it, I got to work my way through that to understand what it is. But joining them, not realizing everything that I had known being on the outside and recruiting for them. Going inside, it was like they really needed the help. They didn't have a lot of processes in place. And so I was a coordinator for about a month, 2 months, and I started filling their roles. Their contract recruiter, it didn't work out. They left. I don't remember the details, but then before you know it, I was running all of their hiring aspects. When I started, they were about 50 people, and I grew them to almost 700 or close to 800, and we built out international where we thought we were gearing to go IPO, and so exciting stuff, built up sales teams, recruiting for everything,
Mm.
and it was a great experience and worked my way up to being a manager, leading a team, building out a team so that we can continue to hire at pace. In my course of being there, then we got bought by LinkedIn.
Gotcha. So just a natural progression because you got in early and worked hard and were able to find the opportunities along the way at a certain point. You've been there long enough that they've just put you in charge of the function.
It's more or less that. It was just that there was only 3 of us between HR, payroll,
Right.
and the recruiting, and so you had to wear a lot of hats, and it was like, "Hey, I think we need to hire another person now. I think we need to do this," and in order even looking at data to say, like, where's the best spot to open up for engineering hiring, because when you're in a location like Santa Barbara County and ours is Carpenter Arena, you don't have that talent in your backyard. There's nowhere else for them to go once they work for you, so you have to get really strategic. So I think just having a strategic mindset, being a roll up your sleeves type of individual, and also knowing how to work in the gray, I think is what led to more success and not being stringent, rolling with the waves of how things evolve when it's a growing organization. I
Is
mean,
there a function that you enjoyed recruiting for more than maybe the others?
yeah. I would say probably the favorite was the production and sales. I think were the 2 favorite that I enjoyed. What was unique about that company is we had a full on movie studio
Oh,
basically.
yeah.
So hiring for like production house, you're doing all of that. And then you've got sales, marketing, customer service, engineering, product. I mean, there's just so many areas of it. And what was unique about it is you got to touch on all of that. So you really understood the business. And I think that's what I enjoy most about recruiting is you can be a recruiter in a company, but you can learn all aspects of the business because you're hiring in all areas.
Yeah, it's interesting. In another podcast, I talked about I'm doing a research project on the side. I'm taking a look at a list of like 230 CHROs, and I want to see how many
Good
came out
lord.
of recruiting. And it's like
Yeah.
less than 1%. And one thing I've been positing in a lot of the content I've been doing is that I really feel that CEOs in the future need to come out of recruiting.
Yeah.
Because we're the salespeople who've been raised in an HR compliant system, and we've got to have firm boundaries. We're traditionally, CEOs come out of finance or they come out of sales. Out in Silicon Valley, they come out of engineering. I really think recruiters are the ideal candidate because they're the ones who are inside the business. They know all the hiring manager. They know all the pieces. They all know all the components. They know how the machine works. They know how the sausage is being made.
Yes.
So it's interesting because it's 2025, but I still feel as a function, we really have a long way to go to evolve. But obviously now with AI and with data and things like that, I think it's becoming much, much easier for recruiting to take its place at the table.
Yes. And I think getting a seat at the table also depends on who your leaders are and how they respect
For
the
sure.
process. I think talent is your number one operating moment of saying, hey, these are our people that are going to get us where we need to go. How we hire is so important, right? And keeping that in mind and putting a little bit more stake on the front end of that process versus just the results of what it yields is the how. And a big proponent of the how. And I feel like recruiting is the
Mm.
how business is going to grow, how business is going to evolve to the next level. And we get to see all those pieces, right? When you see them hiring in one area over here in another function, you're like, hey, you guys are hiring the same thing. Let's talk about this and see if we're not overlapping. And
Look for redundancies, look for ways to
yep,
iterate and improve things.
that's where you be that strong business partner.
Yeah, yeah,
Just
absolutely. And so how do you define success in recruiting, like currently for your organization?
There's a few components that you're out to success, right? The how it got done, which is the partnership with the business, the partnership with the candidates that you're bringing in through, they had a good experience, right? That's one way I like to look at it. Another is the timeline. How long did it take us? If it takes us an extremely long time, how much money are we really saving at the end for the company? Want to see what's the ROI and what and how we're delivering the timeline, and then the result of the individual coming in, like how successful they are, their longevity, and how long they're there. And my last company, 10 years in, you're looking back and those people are still there. They're still running, they're still successful. And since leaving LinkedIn, a lot of them are still there. And that feels good. That feels good. That's success. Like we hired some really good people. If they're still there and still making an impact, like look at that as part of that success. I mean, we can get into the numbers of time to fill, all those things. That's a given. Those things you have to pay attention to. But the things that I think are truly important is what you promised in the beginning or what you sold the company as, and then that's still the case for those individuals. It's looking for the win-win, I think, is where that success comes in. Not just on our side, it's also on the person we hired.
Yeah, looking back, I'm also around 25 years in my career. I look at some companies and like the finance and the customer success organizations I built, the people are still there for
Yeah.
15 years and they're still in those jobs.
Right?
Yeah, like it's just so thrilling. I follow up with them like, how's the how is everything going? So yeah,
Yeah.
it's nice knowing that you can have that value. Looking forward, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges that are facing recruiting teams or maybe that you're facing right now?
Yeah, I think some of the challenges are just the ever changing landscape, right? The uncontrollables, where the market is going and how we react to that and how fast we can react to some of them, right? Going to be one, the economic changes. Two, there's AI, right? The systems and the tools we have access to and how we're utilizing them. And then, you just, and the talent in general, we went through COVID. That was something that no one could predict. No one knew what we kind of HR had to step in and figure out remote. We've never done it before. We're figuring those things out. And then from a recruiting landscape, we had no idea what was going to happen in the market. So you're trying to predict, are we bringing in, are we prepared? Do we have enough people in place that are going to help us do what we need to do? The market was changing. I mean, new industries were evolving from COVID and how we do things. And so it was changing how we hire, what we have to pay attention to. You were no longer meeting someone in person to make sure that was a great hire. So you had to do things a little different. You had to listen for what's being said. You have to really understand the individual and make hire. There was just so many unknowns that we went through. And now we're in a stage where we are dealing with those changes, creating the buy-in in the companies you're in with hybrid or with remote. What's the data behind it, solving that to be able to still continue to make great hires? Because we got really fortunate being able to do a lot of remote hiring. If we can uptick our diversity, we can bring people from
Yeah.
anywhere because they're working remote. Where when you're in office, you're to that location and where what talent is in that location. If you're in those bigger cities, you had more opportunity. But if you're in different areas that there's not a huge landscape for talent, it's going to change. So you have to adjust. And I think those are some challenges that we're still facing from the post COVID.
Are you bringing people in office for final stages now?
At this organization, I would say yes for most of them, but some of them we have made without having them to come into the office.
Gotcha.
It also depends on the leader of that department or the facet of the work, like what's happening with it. What are they doing?
How has your process evolved from your time at LinkedIn now that you're someplace? And I'm sure you probably had to install quite a bit of it when you got in there, or at the very least refine it. But like, how have
Mhm.
you changed your approach? I mean, I would say it's probably the place that you're at now is not as large as LinkedIn, and it probably was in a different state of readiness compared to where you had come from. So, kind of how's your approach evolving?
The approach, I think it's evolving in a way of leading with a lot of understanding of knowing like where they are and really understanding where they are as a company, where they value and want to proceed, but then also making those recommendations and doing it in a way that you're still respecting what's been there and how they got there
Mm,
and keeping those things in mind. Where I feel like I can bring the immediate value is I've seen a lot of what it could be. And so I can start to implement those in those baby steps to get them to where they're fully functioning, automating more of their processes and looking at things with knowing what I know it could be at a large organization when you have all the tools and whistles and bells at your fingertips versus when you don't.
right.
You do have to adjust and do things a little bit differently. And I think my experience at a startup brings that value here where I've seen both sides of the coin and know and have a clear understanding of my values and how I want people to be treated through the process. And so I think it's a unique blend that you get to bring it here. And coming into a completely different industry is also humbling because you're learning new processes and learning what's important to that demographic of talent versus coming out of the tech world and knowing what's important for them, right? Who you're battling and gearing with.
So, really altering your approach based on the environment and the
Yes.
priorities of the
Yeah.
culture, right?
Yes, you have and know when to do it, right? It's not just, "I've always done it this way, I need to do it this way," but to quickly come in and say, "Okay, my approach over here is a little different than my approach here because of XYZ," without giving too much away. It's like you have to be able to mold the environment in which you're recruiting.
It's really funny because I was exposed to world-class best practices at some startups I worked with, VC back in high growth. And when I started my
Right.
business, I'm like, we are doing Asana, we're doing all this structure. And I had the hardest time getting adoption from my introverted global team. And over time, I literally had to streamline it to we communicate in Slack, we have a Trello board, and then we have a
Uh-huh.
roadmap with the overall strategy. And that's it. We follow the Amazon
It
documentation for any feature requests. We really try to think it through and make sure we figure out where it is on the priorities and just keep it really simple. And that's what works for us. But it took me a while to get there.
you get accustomed to working a certain way, so you're like,
Yeah,
"Yeah, doesn't
yeah,
everybody do it like
exactly.
this?" And I think that's what was important for me was I wanna bring immediate impact wherever I was going. I didn't want to go back into the same old because it becomes a little complacent. It's like you want to be challenged. And for me, the challenge is I get to go back into almost a startup environment in some respect where you're building again. You're bringing in new ideas, things they hadn't seen before, just because it might be $1 billion company. We might be leading the pack in what we do, but what we do is not tech and it's agriculture, right? It's coming from there. You're working at a different speed and
Mm,
relationships matter big time, right? It's the way you do business in the ag industry. And they still were operating like a small company, which is great because you still have that feel, but you're a big company. So we're at the turning point where that technology is playing a bigger role. The where I've been is playing a bigger role to bring in that knowledge, to bring in here are the tools that can help us get there, automating and bringing them to the new ways of recruiting, but still keeping some of their old things that really make them
yeah. You
unique.
got to capture the essence of the culture. I mean, that's ultimately that's the only thing that really
Absolutely.
distinguishes individuals or companies, right? Got to be your authentic
Yes.
self. I think that's what resonates probably the most. When
Yes.
you're building a team, what qualities do you look for when you're hiring recruiters?
Oh gosh. I think passion for the work, I think it's really important. So you gotta help people find their net play and understanding what they do. Constantly learn what's new. They're looking at tools. I want to see know what I'm doing and I'm doing really well. That doesn't necessarily mean I have it all right. I want someone who's going to also
Mm.
that can teach the team. I think everyone brings something unique. So I always look for where are my gaps for my team? What can this person do that can really help the next person versus hiring everyone exactly the same. But there's more of like, yeah, I want someone who also leads with a little bit of compassion. You're dealing with the human factor. I think that plays a huge helps in also coaching along when you're dealing with hiring managers and getting them to see a different view versus nope, they don't have this. They didn't hit all the check boxes. Like not everyone's going to check everything. There are unicorns, growing everywhere. We've got to create that unicorn in the individual with the competencies and just understanding what is going to tick for that team and how can we bring in added
Yeah, it's
value
so
by the
funny
new
because
hire
I
we
I
bring in.
remember early in my career, I would hear leaders talk about getting butts
So
in seats, and it hated that term. Like, I just every time I heard it, it made me cringe because I'm like, these are human beings. Yeah, like, these are human beings,
like
right? They've got,
yeah.
like, career desires, they've got families
Yeah.
they're supporting, but we've lived in a very heavy numbers world. I think what I love most about AI is that it's gonna allow unique insights and training and coaching for individuals, for education across their career. What skills do you think are probably the most important for recruiters to develop over the next 2 to 3 years?
Uh, Someone who's at data is going to be huge because that's how you can predict a bit of like what we're going to see. You can plan, you can be more strategic. I think recruiters who can be a strategic partner versus an auditor, to the kind of look at the whole landscape of their departments. So having that unique ability to do that, I think relationship building is huge. Um, you almost have to be somewhat of a little bit of a social chameleon coming in and working with the business partner, right? When you've got a leader, how you work with one is that how you're going to work with all of them. You got to mold a little bit because you've got to build that trust. So someone who can quickly come in and build trust with their partners, I think is really it's a lot of the intangibles. Really, it's like yes, can they search? Do they know how to use some of the tools? Those things are inevitable. That's going to be in every recruiter we're going to look for. But it's the intangibles that we have to look for, so that you're finding someone who brings that level of connectivity. You're dealing with humans. What are we gonna do that's different than AI, right? How are we gonna be different than that? Because that's what we're competing with in a lot of ways, right? How are we gonna show up differently? We're gonna use AI. That's inevitable. We need to in order to keep up with the
Yeah,
pace and
how are
in
you
order to
using AI
automate some of the
currently
areas
in
that
your
we should.
processes?
But yeah, right now at this organization, we're not using it right full extent. I mean, use it within your LinkedIn recruiter, use it within, your chats, your things of proposing and putting things together. I'm not using it as much as I'd like, but part of that is just where we
Got
are
it.
as a
Do
company
you use
and getting
Claude or
those tools
ChatGPT at all?
inherent.
Just
I think it's true for
Perplexity is good.
ChatGPT,
Yeah,
Perplexity, those are the 2 main ones I'm using right now. Your communication or like,
yeah.
"Hey, maybe this can be done a little better." I would say those are the 2 my go-to go-tos at these. And there's also, I think, another group. recording
Listen,
your
I
interviews
you
and then
could
summarizing
I've
them
talked about this
by
and a
their
few
rates.
others. It
That's a
has
game changer.
changed my life. Because after 25 years, I've got this one client, they're a streaming company, and I've taken them from 3 people to 25. They just raised a round A, and they're trying to do something really hard. Streaming the media is really challenging, and just watching them grow and being able to optimize has been pretty rewarding. Do you have any concerns about AI in recruiting?
I mean, I not really concerns because I think it's going to continue to evolve. I think we need to know all we can before we go with a product or line or part of AI. I think that it's going to be highly helpful to us in recruiting and will only continue to go. I look as another strong tool to utilize this to work better, to work more efficient. But we do need to know our reasons why, right? Have a good understanding of like, why do we need it? How is it going to help? What do we want from this? And can we get it out of this tool? Which tool do we need?
They can maybe thinking about building like their own version or anything like that. Are they
Yes.
looking at an overall enterprise like AI type of strategy?
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's good. Right? You know, you've got Copilot with Microsoft. There's these little things that like you got to invest in that, and not just recruiting. Right, it can help the entire organization. I think is more the route any company should go. Is like how can you help for all or most versus just for one area, so that you can control that privacy, so that you can make
Yeah,
sure
and I think that's
we
just a good
are
date of
the company safe.
2025 that most enterprises, that's where they are. They're still figuring out their AI strategies. They're not jumping in with both feet. They're trying to be protective of their data. They're trying to get the best effect out of it. There's companies like Scale.ai that are helping companies build their own LLMs and things like that. So it's a foamy period right now, I'm
Mhm.
saying. Like if you get knocked over by a wave and you don't know which way is up, I think that's the
Yeah.
economy is right now with AI.
We're still in the infancy, right? Like, I mean, even though it's been around now, it's still in its infancy. As it evolves every year. It's like, oh, there's this one comes out, kind of like the iPhone, a new one comes out. You'd think that's
Yeah,
AI
and it's
constantly
amazing the
growing and
ability because I
evolving
did a
with what's
project
being put
once with
into it.
Aon Hewitt.
So,
We had to hire
um,
500 people to become licensed life insurance agents in 6 months. And we had to overhire by 30% because not everybody was gonna get through the training.
wow,
And we're literally, we were going to, like, churches, to community centers. We were interviewing people
right?
for a half an hour. We were giving job offers on the spot. We had big open houses. We brought executives down to interview. And, like, now I think I could probably do it with 3 or 4 3 recruiters, a recruiting coordinator, and AI. I could probably run that whole thing and not even
Yes.
break a
Yep.
sweat doing it.
Yeah. Because yes, it can help you weed out, right? It's kind of like when you have all those tools for engineers, you know, it's
Yep.
like, "Hey, do this, and if you pass this, you move forward, so we're not wasting time talking about it." Like, those are things that have happened years ago that were groundbreaking when hiring in niche areas like engineering. And then as you go forward, right, ATS systems, that's another form of it, right, where it just became a huge time, saver where it's like, "Hey, everything's in there, right? You have your CRMs, you have your ATSs, you have all these things, it's just helping you." It's all been happening. Now it's getting to the point
Right.
where it can do even more, which is interview people for you and get through that process. And like, yes, it makes sense for some
Got it. Are
positions
there any
to
specific
have that
recruiting
front end
tasks
already
that
taken
you
care of so you're not
believe
wasting time.
AI can't replace?
I would say AI is getting pretty good. I mean, I've seen some stuff on LinkedIn that they're doing and getting pretty good. But I think when you're speaking, what AI can't
Mm,
do is listen for what's not being said. And as you think of like in the reading, right, the pauses, the the looking in different directions, and like, I don't know, I'm sure it will get there, but those are the things I think the human factor piece that we bring, and when it comes to negotiating back and forth, I think that is something that's probably hard to replace. The emotional aspect, I mean, I think it's getting close. Um, but I think yeah, I guess that's probably one way that
yeah, I agree. I
a
just
critical
maintain
thinking
that
piece.
I was just talking about that. It seems like there's 2 different viewpoints when it comes to AI, where people are gonna automate everything, including humans, out of the loop, where you've got like AI and Mercor but
Mhm.
I've been around enough 22-year-olds who've raised $1 billion to know that all the different ways that can go wrong really quickly. And I really do believe that the
Yeah.
future is going to be way more
Yes.
business relationships, but with AI augmenting us and allowing us to do 100 times or
Mhm.
1,000 times more than what we can do today. Yeah.
Yes. You still need the human factor for that emotional, that critical, that's the relationship that gets built. Because part of why
Yeah.
you join
Yeah.
or you stay with a company is who you're gonna be working with, right? Who you're gonna be with. I'm working with a computer all day long. Yeah, that makes sense. Let's hire a computer to hire the computer. But if you're working with the humans and you're going through that process, um, you have to be able to that relationship is huge, right? When we think at the end of the day, what is
Yeah.
always standing and who you end up going with at the end of the day is who you resonated with. Who you right? The unconscious biases are happening all the time, right? And maybe the computer can take that, the AI can take that piece out. But then at the end of the day, you're still making your decisions based on your relationships and a lot of times and like what it can do for you. And what it can walk you through the selling point.
The
To buy
crew is
from the
so
computer,
important in
you still
people's
need a
lives. Like it's a
salesperson to
core pillar.
sell to you.
And I just feel that there's always going to need to be a human in the loop.
Yeah.
Now, maybe recruiting will become
Hmm.
a more exclusive profession, which would not necessarily be the worst thing in the world because it's always been the catch all type
No.
of profession,
Hmm.
right? Like sales rejects like me and people who didn't like
Yeah.
HR or aspects of it and decided that they had the sales personality. But
Yes. It's kinda like it's with AI, I kinda look at AI as taking away your front end recruiter, right? And you have that front end recruiter that's just weeding through the call, weeding out the people, pushing things through. I think that piece AI can cover. I don't wanna say to the fullest extent, but it could cover a lot of that. It's all that automation of just that drumming through the calls, weeding through the resumes, you know, but you still have fault in it. There it's just like human factor. There's fault in the human factor as well. Like we're still human, we're gonna make errors. But how fast cares, I like running versus see like, okay, I'm looking for something very specific. When you run a search,
yeah,
that comes up. Yeah, that's a form of AI as well. It's doing it for you. But when you're getting 1,000 applications a day, yeah, that AI front end of it and the questions you ask to tee up. I mean, those are all there's so many forms of it. So it's like, what form are we talking about, right? Where it totally
yeah,
wipes out the
yeah.
work or
So
yeah.
you could change one thing about the recruiting industry. What would it be?
Oh gosh, that's a big question.
Yeah.
What would I change? Mhm. It's the best way to put this. That's a big one because there's so many. I think it would be great if the view of the partnership recruiting play in the growth and strategy of organizations were respected a little bit more of like an appreciation for what role we can play in the organization. I think it'd be great if more companies immediately
That's a
understood the
big
value of that. Like the value of recruiting, right? It's like it does carry a lot. And I think there's a stigma out there because there's a lot of recruiters that have not who really kind of burned the bridges for some of the recruiters trying to build into that industry that didn't there's an art to it. And not everybody gets that. I think it's like, oh, you're just doing this, you're doing that. There's really to the hiring process and to how you treat people through that. I strongly believe that. There's an art to recruiting and not everyone
I
working with some
completely
people
agree. I built a
that taught them
talent
the art.
framework based on the work that I saw and did at Google and this amazing talent framework at Dropbox. And I adapted it to startups and I perfected it at Minnow. And I try to give it away to people for free, and people aren't. They just don't like understand the value of it. I'm like, no, don't you understand that if you build this around competencies, and you're very specific, and like with this one company I work with, like
Mhm.
we've gotten the
Yeah.
process. What you'll love this. We have this super long, takes about an hour and a half intake form gives like psychological style, full job description, all the interview
Okay.
questions for all the different interviewers, the whole interview process, each person, what competencies those persons are for all the way through. And it takes the hiring manager like an
Yeah.
hour and a
I do
half
the
to
same
do it.
thing.
But once they do it and give it to me,
Yeah.
it's done. Like I'm feeding them people. They do the interview, we move them forward to the process. The machine is started. Yeah, it's
And
crazy, but it's so efficient and it's nice because they're getting a
yeah,
reputation.
that's
So it's been a really, yeah, it's been an interest. I mean, I love this profession. I
wow.
love recruiting, and anybody watching this, like, you can get exposed to like amazing
Yes,
opportunities, get in a room with people that you never could have imagined. Like, you learn so much.
you learn so much. You learn so much. That's what kept me in this is that not every day is you you get to talk to so many different people within the organization. You get to be a part of the problem or part of the solving of the problems, right? Which is if it's our hiring, if it's, oh, we need to do this. We bring a uniqueness that I don't think if you've never been in recruiting, it's hard to really, but if you've been in it and you know what you're exposed to, you get to see so much. I think that's their
Yeah,
competency or trait that I look in a recruiter is that they're just naturally curious. Yeah. That's how
yeah.
you hear pause. Like, oh, tell me a little bit more about. Oh, why would you go that route? Tell about that, right? And you're learning,
Huh.
before
So
so
I guess
much just
final
by
question:
interview.
what kind of keeps you passionate about
Yeah,
recruiting? You've been doing it.
the value that it brings. I like it. I want to help people, right? Find their next play. I want them to feel happy and good about it in the process and to be and giving that offer and changing their lives through the opportunities that are arise. Granted, they got the job, but you're helping it along. You're coaching them along to help them. You're helping the hiring manager. You're connect for those people. I think I really enjoy that, and I like that that it's not a thing new constantly. I'm always surprised. And there's always something new. Or oh, I didn't think that. Right? It's like
Right,
anytime someone read an opportunity, I dissect it. Like, what did I miss? They say that I should have been listening for, and I just find that there's a lot of those pockets within it because we are dealing with the human element and emotion, and we get to be a part of that to help the company evolve. And from an in-house perspective, when I was external, it's kind of like a sales position. You get the hot fill, right? And that part was, and you're helping people for
I really do sincerely appreciate your time. Thank you again for joining me on the Meet My Network podcast. It was great to meet you, Dixie, and learn more about you.
likewise. Thank you, Michael. I appreciate you reaching out.